Hello, everyone. Here we are again. It's Yvonne Davis and David Steele of the Rocky Mountain Compassionate Communication Network. We're here to explore NVC and the artist's way. So we're in week 3 now, discussing recovering a sense of power. And because transformational work is so, I like to use the word initiatory. Basically what that means is once you step on the path, you're an initiate, and the process takes over. You don't really get a choice once you step on the path. And, maybe we need to discuss that in further detail, but I'm going to leave it at that for now. So what I mean by that basically is when you set your intention to do transformational work, opportunities will show up in your life for you to actually put the teachings into practice. So here we are in week 3, recovering a sense of power, and both David and I, because we are true initiates, have had our opportunities for personal growth show up at our doorsteps.
Well, in my case, I guess it is a doorstep. I was going to say it's an apartment, but yes, I agree.
Yes. And so I just want to give you a slight overview about some experiences that came up that were very illuminating. So we both had experiences of motivations being misconstrued, intentions being misconstrued. These were completely separate incidents, had no connection or relationship with each other, totally different people, different situations. And I'm not going to go into any of the details. One was basically a stranger, or not someone that was closely known, and the other a family member. But that's all I'm going to say because I don't want to go into the details. But in both cases, I guess I'm going to say it the way that feels natural, but if you want to maybe reinterpret it in a way that uses some more NVC language, you can do that. So the way that I would say it is, it would be about motivations or intentions being misconstrued, but also accusations of things that did not actually happen. So being accused of things that were not true. So then the question comes up, especially because we do NVC work, and so we're dedicated to consciousness expansion, and we're dedicated to compassion and compassionate communication. So, for someone like that, the natural go-to is to give the other person empathy. And what happens sometimes is that if you don't give yourself empathy first, if you don't, take care of yourself. So I'm talking about recovering a sense of power, and some of the needs that are extremely important to that are self-care and self-compassion and self-empathy. And if you don't give yourself that, it becomes really difficult to give empathy to the other person. And I really struggled with that. And I'm not going to describe your situation or what you are feeling or going through, because I think you're perfectly capable of doing that yourself. But that was the situation to begin with. So did you want to add anything to that?
Okay, so yes, I'll frame stuff a little differently. So this is recovering a sense of power, is this week. And we have eyes in our heads, most of us, that look forward. So when we're in a room with people, we see them, but we don't see ourselves. So our picture of the room is incomplete because we're not in it, in our view. And that's true of all human beings. So at some level, we don't acknowledge our own existence as much as we acknowledge the existence of another. And the thing about self-empathy is it's really turning our focus onto the fact that I am going through this stuff, that this stuff is real within me. And in a way, it's making me visible in the room along with everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why it's all about reclaiming our power, because it is really touching into the life force that moves through us and experiencing it directly. So having clarified how, for me, how self-empathy is connected to power, I'm ready to pass the baton back over to you. If only I had a baton to pass. I don't have a baton to pass. So I'll just say, your turn.
Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about this week is impeccability. And so I need to give you just a brief description of what impeccability is. And it's a word that Carlos Castaneda used because in his writings, that was the word that Don Juan used with him. So the thing about impeccability, what it basically means is it's not a moralistic term. It's an energetic term. So what it means is when you're impeccable, you're not leaking energy. And usually we leak energy from the places where we are broken or wounded or repressing energy, where we've clumped our pain and our trauma. It's like we leak power out of those places. So as an example, being in a situation where your acts or your motivations were misconstrued, and you naturally want to defend yourself. You want to say, no, that's not true. I never did that. I never thought that. I never felt that. That wasn't my intention. Those weren't my actions. Because...
Or more directly, you're wrong.
Yeah. Yes. Because, it's especially hurtful when they are claiming that you did things that hurt them, even though the facts that they're stating were not things that you actually did or thought or felt. So it's like, it's kind of, I call it ping pong triggering, because that person apparently got triggered by something that I said or did, and then came back and accused me of things that I knew weren't true. So I got triggered. So
does that mean then you went back and said the things that they did that weren't true?
No, I think, I at least tried to, be responsible for the things that I was feeling, right. And tried to say.
Now there's impeccability. Instead of putting it on the other person, to be responsible for our own feelings. And back to you.
Yeah. Not to blame. And in fact,
it's not to blame.
Yeah. That's one of the quotes I wanted to read by Don Juan today. He says, self-importance, which is the opposite of impeccability, is man's greatest enemy. What weakens him is feeling offended by the deeds and misdeeds of his fellow men. Self-importance requires that one spend most of one's life offended by something or someone. And
I can't believe he said that.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Well, I happen to think he does. But one thing I want to say is that sometimes we're on this path of spiritual awakening and consciousness expansion, and we can end up doing something called spiritual bypass, which means I'm above all that. I, like in here, I am not going to have my feelings offended by the deeds and misdeeds of my fellow men, because I'm above all that. And it's not acknowledging that actually what happened was really painful. It really, really hurts when someone says something that isn't true, particularly about yourself, or when they misconstrue your intentions. It really hurts. And so instead of pretending like we're above it all, we need to acknowledge the truth of how we felt in that moment. And in fact, Don Juan also says that the greatest indulgence is denying the self. Because when we deny the self, it's like we're telling ourselves that we are noble and we're above it all. And the truth is we're just denying what we actually feel. And that just adds to the shadow. It just represses that pain. And so then we don't end up actually transforming. We just stay in a circle. So that's the meaning of spiritual bypass, when you deny what you're truly feeling because you think you should be above it all. You think you shouldn't be hurt or offended by the deeds and misdeeds of his fellow men. But the distinction in this quote isn't that we should never feel hurt or feel pain or feel sadness or even anger. Rather, what it's saying is to look in and say, that really hurt. What needs of mine were not being met? Well, needs for my intentions being seen, for one thing, for being seen for who I am. That's a longing that I have. And so my sadness and my anger is more around that than what the person actually said. Because I know that that person is coming from a place of being hurt and a story in their head about what they think happened. And so I guess, it can get a little bit complicated sometimes, learning to distinguish my stuff from somebody else's stuff. That goes all the way back to week 2 and recovering a sense of identity. What is my stuff? What is their stuff? Now we're moving into week 3, recovering a sense of power. And we're talking about integrity, about not leaking power, which means when you feel hurt, the key is not spiritual bypass, not to pretend like you're above it all and to think, well, I'm just going to, give this person empathy while you are, your own cup is draining because you're in so much pain. Rather, that's the time for self-care. And I have another quote that I found. This is Audre Lorde, who said, I have come to believe that caring for myself is not self-indulgent. Caring for myself is an act of survival. And so I want to say that, when we're recovering a sense of power, that's one of the first places we need to start, is with self-care, self-love, and if necessary, self-protection, and certainly self-empathy and self-compassion. Because until we have done those things for ourselves and acknowledged our pain and our hurt and our anger and taken ownership for it, those were my needs that weren't being met. And true, there might be a desire to point a finger at first and say, you're wrong, but what we're trying to do is bring it back and say, this hurt because my need to be seen wasn't met. And even now I still feel sadness about that, about this situation that's now resolved, but I still feel sadness in my heart about that somebody misunderstood me, or that I said something with no intention to hurt, but I did hurt. So I did hurt that person, even though it was never my intention. But I can learn to be sensitive too. I can't take responsibility for their feelings, but in the future I can make an attempt to be more sensitive, because that is my goal. My goal is to be sensitive. And sometimes it just doesn't work out on this planet Earth the way we want it to. You want to add anything to that?
Yes. Another way to describe impeccability would be to not argue with reality, or not trying to insist that things are different than the way they are. So if I am feeling angry or embarrassed, or if I did something and someone else causes pain, not to make or I did something and someone else feels pain, not to make excuses or be in pretense and pretend things are any different than they are. Mm-hmm. you were talking about impeccability as a energetic thing, and I am remembering a musician who I greatly admired. His name was George Boogie Woogie Daniels. He died some years ago. He was a local Denver musician of immense talent. And one thing that he said was, it's best just to always tell the truth, because when you tell the truth, it's like there's something backing you up and supporting you. And I just thought that actually was really amazing, because there's a stability. You don't have to remember what you said to who or how you're going to twist it and contort it if something comes up, or maybe you'll forget it. It's just like, it's just there. It's solid. It supports you. And that's being impeccable. Impeccability gives you that sort of support. And so self-care, one aspect of self-care is self-honesty, being, sometimes we're afraid to admit to our shortcomings, because then maybe they'll be real or become visible to others. Mm-hmm. And instead, if you talk to people who are very successful, they're very, in business and stuff. When I was in business, CEOs and stuff, they knew what their shortcomings were. And then they would hire people to fill in those gaps rather than pretending they didn't have any shortcomings. Mm-hmm. And so there's a self-recognition, because if we're trying to deny an aspect of ourself, we're hiding from ourselves, and it takes energy to do that. And it undermines our confidence in a way, because we're saying who I am is not enough. And that's another aspect of impeccability, is to acknowledge I am enough. Who I am right now works. When I feel like I have to be something different than I am, that's a form of arguing with reality. So it's really just becoming familiar with ourselves in a very honest way, which sometimes humility is involved in that. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, but it certainly is ultimately very liberating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I want to also reflect back. One of the things I heard you say about impeccability, because it's a tricky word, because it sort of is sometimes misunderstood as perfection. And that's not what it means. It does not mean perfection. It means, I would say more than anything, it means presence. Like you said, it's like not arguing with reality. It's like being totally 100% present. And so being impeccable doesn't mean that you have no faults, or no weaknesses, or that you deny the truth of what you're feeling, what your experience is in that moment, as it may be painful. It's more about the empathetic, present acknowledgement of that truth, to say, in this moment, I wasn't capable. I didn't have the capacity to recognize that what I was sharing with someone was going to be hurtful to them, and so that caused them pain, and then it caused me pain, and just to acknowledge that. I think in the moment, actually, it was difficult for me to acknowledge that I actually hadn't been sensitive. And that's probably why I focused more on what they were saying that wasn't true, because I hadn't acknowledged the role that I had actually played, which is that I had shared something with them without recognizing that it would be painful to them. So, but the fact that I'm able to acknowledge that, one, that I had a lack of sensitivity in that moment, and which is okay. There's no blame, there's no should, it just happened. And secondly, that when they responded in a hurt and angry way back to me, that I didn't have the capacity to give that person empathy in that moment because I was feeling hurt, and I needed to go back into a safe place and really touch in with with the needs that were unmet for me, and give myself empathy and self-care so that I could then come back and start and be more open-hearted with them, more compassionate with them. So, but to me, that's what impeccability is. It's the acknowledgement of what is the state of being at this moment. To think that it's perfection is probably self-delusion. So if David and I use the word impeccability, please do not equate that to perfection. That is not what it means. Have anything to add?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, in that case, we'll bring this to an end. I do think that my feeling about this video is that it was pretty deep, and there's some pretty complex concepts that we've discussed here. So if by chance you have any questions that come up, feel free to write them into the comment box below, and I will either address them in the comments or in a future video, or to you personally. So I'm happy to know. I'm happy for you to share that if you have a question. Okay, so now that we're at the end, that means I do my little spiel where I say, please subscribe, please ring the bell, please click like, share with anyone on social media or friends and family, and we will see you tomorrow. Thank you for joining us.
Bye-bye.